The Wright brothers developed the first effective airplane and made the historic first airplane flight in 1903. In 1905, the Wright brothers built an airplane that could fly for more than half an hour at a time. In 1908, Orville made the world's first flight over an hour at Fort Myer, Virginia. They brought a new and interesting hobby to the U.S. They also inspired many people to try airplanes. Therefore, the Wright brothers started the craze for aviation in the world.
Catherine Stinson was born on February 14, 1891 in Fort Payne, Alabama. She is famous for setting many records in aviation, but before Catherine Stinson became interested in aviation, she wanted to be a professional music teacher.
Only one problem. Her family could not afford the cost of lessons. Catherine eventually found her solution. She found that an aviatrix could possibly earn up to $1,000 a year from exhibitions. Most of her family encouraged Catherine to follow this solution. The only person who objected was her father. He felt that it was too dangerous and that she could get hurt or possibly even killed.
Courage, I think, goes back to her early training,
Catherine said.
If when I was a girl, my mom told me not to do this or not to do that, not to run for fear I might stumble, not to climb the gatepost for fear I might fall, always putting something into my mind to be afraid of, I don't see how I could have any self-reliance at all.
Catherine Stinson was the fourth woman in history to receive her aviator's license. The three women before her were Harriet Quimby, Mathilde Masson, and Julia Clark. Harriet and Julia were both killed while flying.
Mathilde was the only one besides Catherine Stinson who survived the dangerous adventure of flying. However, Mathilde retired after a bad accident with her airplane.
Catherine Stinson was trained by a man by the name of Max Lilly. At first, Max didn't want to teach Catherine because of the fact that she was a female. Another reason he wouldn't teach her was because she was 5'1" and 101 pounds, so she was pretty small. After begging Max Lilly, he decided to teach Catherine. He took her up for a test run, and she absolutely loved it and hated the landing because she was having so much fun.
After just 4 hours of training by Max Lilly, Catherine was flying by herself and eventually took the test and passed to get her aviator's license. She got her license on July 24, 1912 at Max Lilly's school in Cicero Field, Chicago.
Catherine Stinson is also famous for checking every inch of her plane before she flew. She would check everything possible. Catherine thought that more airplane accidents could be prevented if pilots kept their planes clean.
It's all right if your airplane breaks down on the road while you're driving it. You can get out on the road and tinker with it. But if your airplane breaks down in the air while you're flying it, you can't get out on a convenient cloud and tinker with it then.
Although some people made fun of her pre-flight check, eventually it caught on. Even today, people still check their airplanes before flight just like Catherine Stinson did. Catherine was so familiar with her aircraft, she could take it apart and put it back together again. Although cautious on the ground, Catherine Stinson was daring in the air. Since there were limited opportunities for a woman to make money as a pilot, Catherine used her aviation skills to become a barnstormer.
Barnstorming is performing crazy stunts about 1,000 feet in the air without a parachute. Families would do it together to earn money. Children as young as 5 years old would walk along the wings of airplanes.
There were many terrifying and amazing stunts performed. Catherine Stinson was perhaps the best-known barnstormer. Eddie, the second youngest sibling, Catherine being the first, was her traveling companion and mechanic.
In return, Catherine taught Eddie how to fly. In fact, all 4 of the Stinson children were involved in aviation. Catherine and Marjorie were both licensed pilots and taught other people how to fly.
Edward and Jack were also interested in aviation, but did not train pilots like their sisters. Instead, they became mechanics. The brothers worked on engines and other parts of the plane. When Catherine moved to San Antonio in 1913, she and her family decided to open Stinson School of Flying.
Marjorie trained most of the pilots. She trained 81 pilots for World War I. Jack and Eddie were the school's mechanics. Catherine only trained a few pilots for the military. Most of her time was spent doing exhibitions to earn money to keep the school running.
Since aviation was a new thing and people were a little afraid to try it, she thought a good way to reach out to the public about the joys of aviation was speaking to the children at their schools. Catherine wanted to go to every school in San Antonio and teach kids about aviation.
In her flight career, Catherine broke many records and achieved many firsts. Ruth Law broke the record for the longest flight without stopping.
The distance was 590 miles. Catherine later broke the same record with a distance of 606 miles. Beechey came out of retirement to perfect the loop-de-loop and died in 1915 trying to perform that stunt.
Catherine Stinson copied the loop-de-loop and even added her own twist. Catherine decided she was not going to do the same stunts everyone else was able to do. She ended up attaching a magnesium flare to the wing of her plane, and on December 17, 1915, Catherine traced the initial CAL for California.
For landing, Catherine's flight crew lit an oil barrel so she could tell where to land. This was revolutionary. Catherine Stinson wanted to reach out to the world that women could be just as good aviators as men.
She was offered a contract of $50,000 to go to cities in Japan and China where she performed many aerial stunts. She was the first woman to ever fly in China and Japan. She even performed private shows for China's leaders. This created a reform in China because it inspired many women to become pilots.
Japanese women organized fan clubs for Catherine in 1916, hailing her as their liberator. On July 9, 1918, Catherine Stinson flew to Edmonton, Canada, carrying 259 letters. She became the first person to fly mail in Canada. In the U.S., she flew from Chicago to New York. The Kelly Airmail Act was passed, stating that more than one airmail company can carry mail. Airmail revolutionized the speed in which mail is delivered today.
The U.S. had witnessed how much aviation can affect a war and give that country the upper hand. They then issued a call for volunteer pilots. Catherine and Marjorie immediately signed up. The military refused to let them join for one reason.
Even though they were both gifted and skilled aviators, the military wouldn't let them join because they were women.
Because of this, Catherine began to speak against militarism. Some of the other people who were speaking for women's rights at the time were Jane Addams, Joseph T. Bowen, and Mary Hastings Bradley.
Catherine showed how her flight maneuvers could benefit pilots engaged in fighting. Although the military wouldn't allow her to join, she and her sister Marjorie were allowed to train the military cadets for the United States and Canada.
Even though the military turned Catherine down, she still wanted to help with the war effort, even if it wasn't through aviation. Catherine Stinson helped raise money for the Red Cross.
The most profitable way she helped was a flight from Buffalo, New York to Washington, D.C. Along the way, she dropped Red Cross leaflets while flying. At her stops, she collected pledges for money.
When she reached the Capitol, she circled the Washington Monument before landing in a crowd of 5,000 people. She then presented $2 million of Red Cross pledges to the Secretary of the Treasury.
At the end of the war, Catherine caught influenza, which was later diagnosed as tuberculosis. She fought to recover from this disease for 6 years. The treatment the doctors gave her was rest and withdrawal from her previously active life. During World War I, women were given some opportunities while the men were at war. However, not until World War II were women given the opportunity to join the military with the WASP program.
Under the direction of Jacqueline Cochran, women's Air Force service pilots flew 60,000 hours and 60 million miles for the military. Congress canceled the WASP program on December 20, 1944. Since the group had never been made an official part of the military, the WASP were not eligible to receive veteran benefits. That decision was not reversed until September 20, 1977. Maxine Flournoy was a member of the WASP until she, like all the other WASP, received her honorable discharge papers in 1944. Miss Flournoy shares her thoughts on the women flying for the military during World War II.
Well, I think they were treated differently at different fields. Now, I was stationed at Hondo, Texas, which was Hondo on the airfield, was a navigation school, and there were 7 of us assigned there, and we were treated very nice. Nobody really discriminated against us, but I understand a few WASPs were assigned to bases where the commanding officer didn't want them, and they had to take them anyway. And I understand they weren't treated very well, but you know, they had to accept us and they had to let us fly.
Even though Catherine Stinson did not get to participate as a WASP, she helped pave the way for women today.
Catherine Stinson created a reform by being one of the first women to get their license and apply for the military. She also created a new way to help prevent airplane accidents. She got positive reactions from almost everyone. The military were some of the only people that didn't approve of women flying or entering the military. Catherine Stinson was one of the many aviators who revolutionized the way we use aviation today. Catherine Stinson was determined and did not let anything stop her, not even fear.
Fear, as I understand it, is simply due to lack of confidence or knowledge.